To live outside the law, you must be honest. Bob Dylan. Now imagine this in the context of society. A man who doesn't chase money, doesn't care what people think, and refuses to play by the usual rules. Not because he's angry, not because he's lazy, but because he genuinely does not need what most people are spending their lives trying to get. He doesn't want status. He doesn't need recognition. He walks through the world quietly, without ambition, without shame, and that makes him deeply inconvenient. From a psychological point of view, he's disruptive in a way most people can't articulate. Society functions by reward systems. You work, you're praised. You achieve, you're admired. You sacrifice, you get status. That's how order is maintained. But this man doesn't respond to those cues. He opts out without protest. And that's where the real threat lies. He doesn't break the rules violently, he just refuses to need them. Philosophers like Diogenes and Lao Tzu lived this way. They were not interested in being seen as wise or respected. They lived close to the earth, with very little, and seemed to be more at peace than the kings and scholars around them. And for modern people, always proving, performing, building their identities like resumes, someone who does not want what we want is hard to digest. He's not a role model. He's a mirror, one that reflects back a hard question. What if we're chasing things we don't actually need? Let's dive in. Number 1. He shatters the illusion that life must be earned. Let's take a hard look at this idea. He shatters the illusion that life must be earned. That might sound poetic, but psychologically, it's a direct threat to how most people structure their lives. From a young age, we're taught that everything must be earned. Respect, love, money, rest. You do your chores, you get allowance. You study hard, you get praise. You work, you get paid. Simple, right? But over time, that idea gets baked into something deeper. The belief that your worth as a person depends on what you produce, how much you impress, how visible your success is. In psychology, we call this conditional self-worth. It means you feel valuable only if you're doing something that others approve of. Now imagine a man who doesn't care about approval. He doesn't chase money. He's not trying to impress anyone. He just is. He doesn't hustle. He doesn't brand himself. He doesn't post life updates. Yet he's calm, content, and unmoved by failure or fame. He's not trying to earn life. He's just living it. This kind of man breaks something in people, quietly. Because whether you're a corporate executive or a student buried in expectations, you might suddenly start asking, why am I always performing? Who am I doing this for? Philosophers like Diogenes and Lao Tzu weren't lazy or bitter. They just stopped playing the game. Diogenes lived in the street and mocked social norms. Lao Tzu walked away from power to write about flow, peace, and letting go. What made them so radical wasn't that they abandoned wealth or status. It's that they didn't need to replace them with anything else. That's terrifying to most people, because if someone can feel whole without climbing, winning, or proving, then what does that say about the rest of us? Sprinting endlessly, begging for likes, battling burnout? This man forces society to look in the mirror, and what we see is not freedom. We see dependency on approval, on purpose tied to output, on identity tied to ambition. So yes, he is a burden, not because he's doing harm, but because he quietly proves that everything we chase might be unnecessary. He doesn't destroy society, he reveals its illusion, and illusions, once broken, are hard to rebuild. Number 2, he dissolves the myth of scarcity. Let's talk about one of the most powerful ideas that keeps the world spinning: scarcity. The belief that there's not enough money, not enough time, not enough status, not enough beauty, not enough anything. It's everywhere. In marketing, politics, relationships, even spirituality. From a psychological point of view, scarcity is not just a condition, it's a mindset. Now, imagine a man who doesn't buy into it. He doesn't hoard, he doesn't hustle for more. He has little but needs even less. He doesn't wake up in a panic thinking he's behind. He's not chasing the next upgrade, the next trophy, or the next milestone. His life is simple, but not empty. In fact, he seems full, focused, grounded, even joyful. That man dissolves the myth of scarcity just by living differently. Philosophers like Lao Tzu wrote about this over 2,000 years ago. He said, "He who knows he has enough is rich." That's not a motivational quote. It's a direct attack on the economy of fear. Most of our lives are run by the idea that we're always missing something. Social comparison feeds it. Advertising thrives on it. Even your inner critic speaks it fluently. Psychologically, this mindset activates stress, anxiety, and competition. It pushes people to work jobs they hate, to buy things they don't need, to stay in relationships that feel hollow. Scarcity keeps the machine running. It's what fuels ambition, but also burnout. So when someone lives outside of it, it unsettles people. You'll hear things like, "He's not ambitious," or "He's wasting his potential." But that discomfort isn't about him. It's about what he reflects. If he can live without excess and still feel complete, then maybe all the extra effort, all the sleepless nights, all the comparison, maybe that wasn't about survival. Maybe it was just addiction. A man like that doesn't have to preach. His life is the argument. He's not lazy. He's not delusional. He simply doesn't believe that more equals better. And when enough people see that with their own eyes, something begins to crack. Not in him, but in the system that told us we're never enough. That's why he's not just different. He's disruptive. Number 3. He doesn't contribute to the dopamine economy. Let's talk about dopamine, the brain chemical that drives your desire to check your phone, chase likes, buy things you don't need, and binge content for hours. It's not evil. It's natural. It's part of how we survive. But in modern life, that system has been hijacked. What used to help us seek food or connection now has us chasing stimulation non-stop. This is what I call the dopamine economy, a world designed to keep you wanting, scrolling, clicking, and consuming. Every app, ad, headline, and product is competing for a slice of your attention. They study your habits, your fears, your impulses. And in return, you get little hits of dopamine, short-lived satisfaction that keeps you coming back for more. Now here comes a man who doesn't play along. He doesn't scroll mindlessly. He doesn't binge shows. He doesn't constantly check his notifications. He doesn't even care if he has a brand, a platform, or a following. He's not bored, but he's not looking for entertainment either. He's present, focused, and strangely peaceful. From a psychological perspective, this man is breaking the reward cycle, and that's rare. Because most of us are stuck in what's called variable reward reinforcement, the same thing that makes slot machines addictive. You keep checking for that one good email, that one viral post, that one purchase that will finally make you feel complete. But nothing ever truly satisfies. The man who rejects all this becomes a ghost in the machine. He's unreadable by algorithms, unreachable by ads. He's not part of the traffic. He's not the target audience. To systems built on engagement, he's a flat line, a dead zone. This isn't just admirable, it's disruptive. Because if one person can live without the endless chase for stimulation, others might start asking, why can't I? Why am I glued to a screen refreshing for validation, numbing out instead of tuning in? Philosophers like Diogenes mocked luxury and excess, not because they hated pleasure, but because they saw what it did to people. Lao Tzu spoke of stillness and withdrawal, not as weakness, but as power. The man who steps out of the dopamine economy doesn't just gain clarity. He exposes how much noise the rest of us confuse for life. Number 4. Let's sit with an uncomfortable truth. Most people don't know they're not free. They think they are because they chose their job, their lifestyle, maybe even their partner. But from a psychological lens, freedom isn't just about choice. It's about awareness of why you choose what you choose. That's where things start to fall apart. Enter the man who doesn't chase status, wealth, or validation. He doesn't measure time and productivity. He doesn't chase goals for the sake of feeling useful. He simply exists, without apology, without performance. And that makes people deeply uncomfortable. Not because he's doing something wrong, but because he's not doing what everyone else is doing. This man becomes a mirror, and not the flattering kind, a raw, unforgiving one. When people look at him, they see everything they've been running from. They start to notice that their 5-year plans feel like chains, that their so-called dream job is quietly draining their spirit, that most of their goals weren't born from the soul. They were assigned by culture, fear, or the need to feel enough. In psychology, we call this cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable tension between how we live and what we know deep down might be more true. The man who lives outside the system triggers this dissonance without saying a word. He doesn't criticize. He simply exists on his own terms, and that alone reveals how few of us truly do. Diogenes lived in a barrel and mocked people for calling themselves free while being owned by their desires. Lao Tzu urged us to let go of striving and return to stillness, warning that ambition often disguises fear. These were not eccentric thinkers. They were psychological revolutionaries. The real shock isn't that this man is free. It's how many of us voluntarily surrendered that same freedom for comfort, approval, and structure. We call it being responsible. We call it being ambitious. But is it possible that we just didn't want to face the silence of not being told what to do? This is why he's seen as a threat. Not because he's dangerous, but because he forces people to look at their lives with honesty. And once you've seen the cage, even a golden one, it's hard to pretend it's a home. Number 5. He is immune to humiliation. Let's talk about shame, not in an abstract sense, but as one of the most effective tools society uses to keep people in line. From childhood, we're trained to care what others think. Good grades make adults smile. Embarrassment teaches us where the invisible fences are. Over time, this becomes a deeply wired fear of being judged, excluded, or seen as less than. Now picture a man who no longer reacts to that fear. He doesn't care what people think of him. He walks barefoot, sleeps outside, says things that make people uncomfortable. He doesn't defend himself when mocked. He doesn't try to prove anything, not his intelligence, his value, or his success. That kind of person short-circuits the entire system of social control. Psychologically, this is radical. Shame is what stops most people from being fully honest, from trying things that might fail, from living authentically. We avoid shame the way animals avoid fire. So when someone becomes immune to it, society doesn't know what to do with him. He's ungovernable, not in the chaotic, rebellious sense, but in the calm, detached way that says, you can't manipulate me through image anymore. And that's terrifying, not just to governments or corporations, but to regular people who have built their whole lives around being seen the right way. This is what made Diogenes so dangerous. He mocked kings and philosophers alike. When asked why he lived like a dog, he said, "Because I look at people and laugh at their vanity." Lao Tzu didn't mock, but he withdrew. He walked away from prestige because he knew that reputation is a leash with velvet lining. From a psychological standpoint, this man has stepped outside the reward-punishment loop that runs most of society. If praise can't lure him and shame can't tame him, then how do you make him comply? You don't. You can't. He has nothing to protect, and that makes him more powerful than any polished executive or decorated general. This is why he's not just misunderstood, he's unsettling. His indifference reveals how much of our behavior is just fear wearing a polite mask. He's not fighting the system, he simply doesn't need it. And when shame stops working, so does control. Number 6, he can't be marketed to. Let's pull back the curtain for a moment. Most of modern society runs on one core assumption. You want something, not just food or shelter, but recognition, luxury, beauty, novelty, identity. This endless wanting is what fuels advertising, politics, religion, even self-help movements. If you didn't want, most of these industries would collapse. Now imagine a man who simply doesn't want. Not because he's numb or depressed or ascetic in some romanticized way, but because he's seen through the game. He's not chasing upgrades, not yearning for status, not hungry for praise or belonging. And that makes him immune in the most inconvenient way. He can't be marketed to. Think about how strange that is in today's world. You see 100 ads a day telling you what you're missing. Campaigns are designed with precision, targeting your insecurities, your cravings, your identity. You're not just sold a product, you're sold a version of yourself that you're supposed to chase. That's how persuasion works. It creates a gap between who you are and who you could be, and then sells you the bridge. But this man doesn't feel that gap. He's not interested in becoming anyone else. He's not on a personal brand journey. He's not upgrading his wardrobe, his diet, or his mindset. He's not buying in, literally or psychologically. And for the systems that depend on persuadability, This is deeply problematic. In psychology, we call this low susceptibility to external influence. It's rare. Most people are incredibly responsive to social pressure, trends, and the illusion of progress. But this man has stepped outside that loop. He sees the game and simply chooses not to play. That's not passive, it's clarity. Philosophers like Diogenes mocked the entire marketplace of desire. He lived with nothing and still felt whole. Lao Tzu spoke of non-striving, of moving with the Tao rather than grasping at illusions. Both men weren't just resisting culture, they had no use for it. So when someone comes along who can't be persuaded, sold to, or recruited, he becomes a glitch in the operating system. Not because he's hostile, but because he's self-contained. You can't sell freedom to someone who's already free, and that's not just rare, it's revolutionary. Number 7. He bypasses the social contract without chaos. Let's talk about something most people take for granted, the social contract. This unspoken agreement that says, if you play by the rules, we'll keep the world from falling apart. You get up, go to work, pay your bills, respect authority, stay productive, stay polite. In return, you're promised stability, security, a sense of place. Society assumes this is what holds everything together. Now here comes a man who doesn't sign the contract. And yet he causes no chaos. He's not angry, not violent, not trying to burn anything down. He simply exists on the edge of the system, needing nothing, demanding nothing, and disturbing no one, except in how deeply his presence makes people question everything. Psychologically, this is fascinating. We're trained to believe that without structure, people fall apart, that without external goals and authority, we descend into disorder. But here's someone living without being driven by power, status, or even approval. And somehow, he's more centered than the people trying to hold it all together. He lives without ambition, but not without awareness. He doesn't seek control because he doesn't feel out of control. There's a kind of inner authority there, something that can't be handed out by institutions. In psychology, we call this self-regulation, the ability to govern yourself from within without needing constant external reinforcement. This is what Lao Tzu meant when he spoke of living in harmony with the Tao, a natural order that requires no force. And it's what made Diogenes so strange to his peers. He had no master, no job, no reputation, and yet he radiated confidence, not arrogance, something quieter, something untouchable. This man's existence disproves the belief that authority and ambition are the price of peace. He doesn't contribute to GDP, he doesn't vote, he doesn't network, and yet he harms no one. He brings no violence, he adds no disorder. If anything, he embodies a kind of stillness most people crave but rarely access. That's why he's unsettling. Because if one person can live outside the contract and still remain whole, it raises a question society does not want to ask. Was the contract ever really necessary? Number 8. He erodes the narrative of progress. Society sells the future as salvation. Modern life runs on a very specific story. Progress equals purpose. You are always becoming something, more successful, more attractive, more enlightened, more productive. The future is the reward. The now is just something to get through. This story is everywhere, in school systems, career ladders, personal development books, even therapy. We're told, keep going. You're not there yet, but you will be if you just try harder. Now imagine a man who stops, not because he's given up, but because he sees the game for what it is. A treadmill disguised as a path. He doesn't care about becoming. He doesn't measure his life by milestones or upgrades. He's not working on himself. He's not optimizing his morning routine. He's not trying to make the moment mean something. He's simply here. Psychologically, this is dangerous, in the best possible way. It's a direct challenge to what's called future-oriented identity. The idea that you're defined by what you're moving toward. Most people stay on the hamster wheel because their sense of self is built around potential. It keeps you striving, but also keeps you anxious, restless, and never fully satisfied. The man who lives in the now breaks that loop. He's not trapped in nostalgia or fantasy, he's fully awake to this moment, and that's where his peace comes from. Not because life is perfect, but because he's stopped running from it. Philosophers like Lao Tzu taught that the obsession with progress pulls us out of alignment with life itself. Diogenes lived with almost nothing and still felt whole. Neither man needed the promise of more to justify their existence. And that's what makes this kind of person unsettling. Not that he's lazy, not that he's cynical, but that he shows, quietly, unmistakably, that the future is not salvation. It's just another carrot. He dismantles the myth that you're always one achievement away from happiness. He refuses to hustle for a better version of life. And in doing so, he doesn't fall behind. He drops out of the race entirely. He's not stuck. He's free. And in a society addicted to becoming, his presence is like a glitch in the code. One that asks, what if there's nothing to become? What if now is already enough? Number 9. He's a psychic pollutant to the status-obsessed. In a society obsessed with climbing, comparison, and credentials, status is the quiet god everyone worships. It shows up in job titles, follower counts, luxury items, even in the way people speak, carefully curated to signal intelligence, success, or moral superiority. It's not just about ego, it's about survival in a world where visibility is currency. Now picture someone who doesn't care at all. He doesn't chase recognition, he doesn't posture, he's not trying to impress you or outshine anyone. And here's what makes him dangerous. He's not bitter, he's just free. Psychologically, this man is a threat not because he competes, but because he refuses to. He ignores the scoreboard entirely. And for those who live to win, this is maddening. His existence messes with the power dynamic. It introduces a kind of spiritual static into the system, something that doesn't compute. This is what we might call a status disruptor, a person whose indifference to prestige lowers the psychological temperature of the room. He dilutes the currency everyone else is trading in. He's like someone who shows up to a high-stakes poker game and calmly plays for fun. Win or lose, he's unaffected, and that unshakable peace rattles the ambitious. People like Diogenes lived this way. He mocked Alexander the Great and refused to flatter anyone. Not because he wanted to rebel, but because he saw through the illusion. Lao Tzu left a position of influence not in protest, but in quiet rejection of the idea that external power was worth his inner clarity. From a psychological standpoint, status is addictive. It activates reward circuits in the brain. We crave recognition because it makes us feel safe, seen, and significant. When someone doesn't play by those rules, it reveals how much of that hunger is conditioned, and how fragile the whole game really is. To the status-obsessed, this man is a kind of spiritual pollutant, not dirty or corrupted, but unclean in the sacred temple of ambition. He doesn't fight for position, and that alone throws off the hierarchy. He makes effort look neurotic. He makes striving seem absurd. He doesn't shame the powerful, he just lives without needing power. And that erodes the very belief that power is what gives life meaning. Number 10. He reminds people their lives may be performative theater. Most people don't realize they're performing. They wake up, go to work, interact, post, speak, all while subtly adjusting their behavior to fit a role shaped by culture, expectation, fear, and the deep need to be seen as someone of value. Over time, this performance becomes so routine it feels like truth, but it isn't. It's theater, and it's exhausting. Now enter a man who isn't acting. He doesn't edit himself, he doesn't manage impressions, he doesn't say what will make him look smart or evolved or successful. He doesn't smile to be liked or shrink to be acceptable. He's raw, not reckless, not rude, just real. And this kind of rawness, it's unsettling. Because in his presence, something happens. Other people start to hear their own scripts. They feel the strain of pretending, the filtered language, the forced politeness, the anxiety over optics. It all becomes visible. His authenticity shines a light on their choreography, and they don't like it. Psychologically, this is called self-presentation theory, the idea that much of what we do is shaped by how we want to be perceived. Most of us are constantly managing that image, even when we don't realize it. But when someone steps outside of that need, it creates discomfort, not because they're dangerous, but because they reflect how deeply others are trapped in the act. Philosophers like Diogenes leaned into this discomfort. He once walked through the streets with a lamp in broad daylight, claiming to be looking for an honest man. Lao Tzu, instead of trying to lead or teach in the traditional sense, simply disappeared into the mountains. Both men lived outside the theater. They weren't actors, they were observers. And that made them untouchable. This is why the man who doesn't perform is so threatening. He doesn't expose people by accusing them. He exposes them just by being. His silence makes others speak louder. His stillness makes their busyness look frantic. His ease reveals their tension. He doesn't shame, he doesn't correct. But being around him feels like standing in front of a mirror that reflects the performance. And once you see it, it becomes very hard to pretend it's real. In final words, the truth is rarely pure and never simple. Oscar Wilde. Let's be honest, most people don't really want freedom. They want a comfortable version of it. Something that looks like freedom but still fits within what's socially acceptable. A nice job, a little respect, a sense of control, some applause now and then. That's the deal we make. We stay inside the system, and in return we get to feel like we matter. But the man who doesn't chase wealth or approval, he tears that deal to pieces just by breathing. He's not angry. He's not even trying to prove anything. But his existence quietly confronts us with the question, why am I doing all of this? If someone can live without the rewards I'm chasing, then maybe those rewards aren't as necessary as I thought. And if that's true, what does that say about the way I've built my life? Psychologically, we defend against this kind of person not because he's dangerous, but because he's disorienting. He doesn't reflect what we expect to see. No ambition, no insecurity, no polished persona, just a kind of calm defiance, not rebellion, just refusal. That's harder to deal with than a loud critic. A loud critic you can argue with, but a man who simply does not want what you want. That's a mirror most people don't want to look into. This is why he becomes a burden, not to the state or the economy or the public, but to our inner story. He makes us uncomfortable, not because he's wrong, but because he might be right. Because maybe it is possible to live without needing permission, without running in circles, without proving yourself. But that possibility forces us to confront how much of our identity is built on the chase. So yes, he is a burden, but only in the way truth is a burden, only in the way silence is a burden in a world addicted to noise. He does not fit. And in not fitting, he reveals that maybe the shape of society was never designed for freedom, just obedience. And that's the real discomfort. He's not dangerous, he's just free. And freedom in its pure form is terrifying. Thank you for watching, and see you in another exploration.